So, welcome to our STAR Campus webinar. How can I apply my experience to machine translation projects as well? And validation rather than repair, the clever use of translation memory and machine translation. Thank you very much for joining today. My name is Nadira Hofmann and I work at the training and support team at STAR Language Technology and Solutions in Germany. This company is a subsidiary of the STAR Group. The STAR Group is represented with more than 50 offices in 31 countries. Our range of services includes translation service management and software development, technical writing, information management, and more. In this webinar, you will learn how you as a project manager or translator can benefit from using machine translation and how you can control the use of machine translation over your translations. Transit NXT combines translation memory and machine translation and supports powerful translation and quality assurance functions from which project managers, translators, as well as post-editors can profit. You will see in this webinar how you as a project manager or translator can make use of the results from machine translation in Transit and how you always know whether you are working on MT suggestions or fuzzy matches from your translation memory. Machine translation will not replace experienced professional translators, but it can be an efficient tool for project managers and professional translators when this tool is understood and used in the right context. Combining translation memory and machine translation can be a very efficient tool to increase productivity during your translation process. At the beginning, I will give you an overview of MT and explain where we can integrate machine translation into existing processes. I will also explain what the so-called engine training includes. You will see how project managers and translators can include and use machine translation in their translation projects very easily. I will show you how Transit combines fuzzy matches and MT proposals in the editor and how to use the results of machine translation. You will see that you always know whether you access machine translation or translation memory. With Service Pack 9, our Transit translation editor will include a kind of new type of translation proposal. It's a combination of fuzzy match from the translation memory and proposals from machine translation. Under the motto validating instead of repairing, Transit validates the MT results with the translation memory material rather than repairing missing parts of fuzzy matches by machine translation. With TM validated MT proposals, you as a translator can benefit from the quality of a validated translation memory and the efficiency of an MT system. If you have questions, I will be very happy to answer them at the end of the webinar. Please use the chat window for sending me your questions. During the webinar, I will close this window. Now let's start. Why machine translation? Machine translation is one of the oldest disciplines of artificial intelligence and is an attempt to perform typically human capabilities by a machine. Technologies for machine translation emerged already in the 50th of the 20th century. The demand for translation has greatly increased in recent times due to web technologies, a rapidly increasing internet community, its linguistic diversity, the explosion of content, and continuing globalization. These are the main driving forces for the mounting demand for readily available multilingual information. With the advent of statistical machine translation, refinements in rule-based machine translation, and the combination of both technologies, the quality of MT has undeniably improved, even though only for maybe a limited number of language combinations and text types. Be it as it may, MT with human post-editing is increasingly considered as a solution to help overcome language barriers. Machine translation is not a miracle machine nor a pure scientific gimmick of no practical use. The most common applications for MT include the translation of websites, online chats, real-time auctions. So quick translation is required, and quality does not have to be perfect. Here, a good enough quality is needed. Another field of application is the translation of technical texts, for example, manuals, operating instructions, and so on. Especially in highly standardized text having a controlled source language, MT can be very efficient. Here, quality matters. Well, translation of novels and poems are less suitable for machine translation. The use of machine translation in STAR products. STAR MT is a system that has been developed by the STAR Group for machine translation, and it's developed on the basis of Moses. STAR MT is already being used in the following areas. Ideally, the MT system connected in Transit is used in conjunction with the corporate language management STAR CLM. The two steps, sending segments without validated pre-translation from the translation memory to the STAR engine, and the post-editing of the received MT suggestions can be seamlessly integrated into established workflow processes. The result of such workflows is validated quality-assured translations. STAR MT Translate is a web application to access so-called trained engines for quick translation. STAR MT Translate can be used as a Google Translate alternative via intranet, and confidential company data stay in-house. STAR MT Translate immediately provides you with the STAR MT translations, however, without prior validation from a translator or post-editor. MT can be used during the authoring process already. For example, if technical writers working on the same project write in different languages. And of course, STAR MT Translate can be used in our translation service as well. How does it work, machine translation? Generally, machine translation is the translation of text by a computer with no human involvement. When it comes to machine translation, there are essentially two options: statistical and rule-based system. With rule-based systems, linguists model the complexity of language and translation in rules separately for each language direction and text type. This requires not only extensive linguistic expertise in each potential source and target language, but also a long preparation time before the first machine translation. Statistical systems create their own rules for a given language direction through the extensive automated training with client-specific translation memories and terminology databases. The MT system can be updated for new text types, additional language directions, or stylistic developments at any time via a new training. Statistical systems have no knowledge of language rules. Instead, they learn to translate by analyzing large amount of data for each language pair. Parallel corpora consisting of translated segment pairs are the basis. These sources are exploited by statistical algorithms for different purposes, for example, to automatically generate a bilingual dictionary, for extracting rules for the syntactic transfer, up to designing of a complete statistically working translation system. And there are also hybrid systems on the market. It is a combination of both. The basis is, to my knowledge, the rule-based system, and statistical. The statistical part is at the end. Yeah. StarMT is a phrase-based statistical machine translation system. Statistical means that the system is trained with bilingual text corpora and from this determines patterns, frequencies, and statistical connections, and uses these to perform future automatic translations. StarMT trains so-called engines on the basis of this parallel text corpora of a particular language direction. Validated translations, for example, transit reference material and terminology for a particular topic, are the basis of this text corpora. StarMT benefits from 30 years of experience in intelligent language processing, data, and format handling. We use this experience to create from Transit the so-called training material for the engine training. So Transit creates from reference material and term-start dictionaries a bilingual text corpus. The training material has to be as clean or pure as possible. So Transit creates from the reference material and terminology pure text files having no markups, etc. anymore. Each StarMT engine is trained with a bilingual text corpus of one source and one target language. Each engine is used for one language direction. So we have, I have here a typing mistake. So I have one engine is English to German, and the other one is German to English. This is the second engine. So all in all, we have an additional use of our validated translation memory or reference material and terminology for machine translation. Basically, a variant of the translation memory is created. What happens actually to the training material? After the creation of the training material, the training packages are sent to StarMT. The translation processes in the SMT is modeled using statistical probabilities and basically try to answer the question, what is the highest probability for the translation of a segment, a phrase, or a word? SMT generally consists of two processes, a training step and a translation step. During the training, a so-called translation model and a so-called language model are calculated and created with the help of a parallel corpus, our training material. The translation model is calculated from aligned texts of source and target language. The language model is calculated from word sequences of the target language. The language model, in fact, learns the style of your text. The translation process consists of two steps, the so-called decoding, using the translation model and the calculation of the optimal target language word order by using the language model. I will show you now how machine translation is integrated in Transit. I will focus on the following questions. During project import, how can you as a project manager use, in addition to the translation memory, the trained StarMT engines as well? And how can you as a translator benefit from the trained StarMT engine during translation? The concept of the MT integration in Transit is Transit strictly distinguishes between two MT usage scenarios depending on the kind of MT engine that it exchanges data with. So we have editor MT and import MT. With editor MT, translation proposals from online translation services can be displayed in the Transit editor. During translation, these can be requested via right mouse click by the translator instead of working with copy and paste. This is the standard option since Service Pack 7, and with editor MT, for example, Google Translate or Microsoft Translate are supported. The use of online translation services must be enabled in the user preferences by the translator. In this webinar, I will focus on import MT. For data security reasons, many companies often do not trust free online translation services, but they rely on in-house customer-specific implementations. Those customer-specific solutions can be accessed via Import MT in Transit. Import MT is optional and has to be enabled by a license number. Import MT supports customer-specific trained MT systems only, so no online services like Google Translate. And responsible during project management is the project manager. So the project manager or Star CLM, our workflow system, create MT suggestions during project import. Here, as always, for import MT, project files are imported into Transit and pre-translated with reference material with translation memory. New is, during the import, non-pre-translated segments are sent to StarMT, and StarMT returns translation suggestions. From the beginning, the Star Group has not only used machine translation for segments for which there are no fuzzy matches, but also for segments for which there are fuzzy matches available. As a result, the translator receives automatically in the PPF, our translation package, suggestions from the translation memory, the classic fuzzy match, and or in addition now an MT suggestion. This clever approach also results or will result in Service Pack 9 in a combination of translation memory and machine translation. We call it TM validated MT suggestion. Maybe this is a new type of translation suggestion. I will show you more in some minutes. I will show you now how what is new for the project manager in Transit. So translation memory and statistical machine translation are now combined. So the project manager in the project settings, as always, the project manager does his settings and adds reference material, as always, for the classic Transit pre-translation. And here in addition to this reference material tab, we have now another tab. It is called Machine Translation. In the tab Machine Translation, the project manager can define the settings for MT during import. Here, only customer-specific trained systems can be accessed. Thus, the project manager can now use, in addition to the classic reference material, customer-specific trained engines as well. The project manager determines what is sent to StarMT. Only segments for a certain minimum length or up to a certain maximum length, or only segments with no good fuzzy matches. By accessing the trained, by accessing the trained engines, Transit creates during project import additional MT suggestions for segments that have not been pre-translated with the translation memory. The project manager can here define which segments are sent to the trained MT system. For example, all segments for which there are only fuzzy matches lower than 70%. For example, so here Transit only sends segments to the trained systems for which there are no fuzzy matches. Only for segments with at least words, the project manager can specify that only segments within a certain length range are sent to the MT system, so at least or maximum words. Penalty for machine translation. Fuzzy matches and import MT matches are handled in Transit with a different priority and weighting. You as a project manager can, for example, give priority to fuzzy matches by defining a penalty for MT matches. The lower the penalty, the higher the MT match is placed in the fuzzy window. Please note, the penalty does not reflect the quality of the MT match because we cannot validate the quality of an MT match. Yeah, the penalty simply influences the position in the fuzzy window. Here, the project manager selects the trained engine. And I made you a screenshot of the engine, of the selection. So here the project manager can see in the overview that for all target languages of his project, there is a trained StarMT engine available as it is marked in green. Yeah. I will show you now how translators can benefit from these additional MT suggestions during translation in the Transit editor. So let's assume my project manager did send me a PPF. And in this PPF, my project manager informed me that I have, in addition to the classic fuzzy matches, also MT matches. So I will show you first how it looks like if I have no fuzzy match. Yeah. So in this segment, 4185, I call up a translation proposal as usual with Alt-Enter. And I see here in my fuzzy source window that I have a translation proposal from machine translation. So as always, the source segment is displayed and a translation proposal from machine translation is suggested to me, I have no fuzzy match. Yeah? And here, as always, me as a translator, I can make my changes and just accept this translation. Yeah? So I can make some changes, whatever. And with Alt-Enter, I copy the translation in the target language. And with Alt-Insert, I go to the next segment, not translated yet. In this segment, again, I have no fuzzy match, but a translation proposal from machine translation. And here you see that even markups are placed correctly. Yeah. So again, me as a translator, I can work as usual, make my changes and so on, and go on. The same, I have no fuzzy match, but another proposal which comes from machine translation, and I see as a translator, it's clear to me that it is machine translation. Yeah? Again, the same. Here a tab again. In this segment, again, no fuzzy match, but machine translation proposal. And it is highlighted in colors that this segment could not be translated by statistical machine translation. So if you have an untranslated word in your machine translation proposal, it is highlighted it is highlighted with a color. Yeah. So for those examples, I had no fuzzy match, but an MT proposal. And how does it look like if I have both? Yeah. I have here the combination of machine translation and the classic fuzzy match. Yeah. So me as a translator, I see here what is the difference. Yeah. And I decide what is the best translation. I can, in this case, I accept my machine translation proposal. And the next segment, again, I have an empty proposal and a fuzzy match. In the fuzzy match, as always, is highlighted what is the difference. Yeah, I see here the word "the" has been added and another English text. And in the fuzzy, I have my old translation proposed. In this case, our StarMT system has already translated this missing part. And in this case, the MT proposal is for me perfect. Yeah, and I can accept it. Let's assume I have translated this project with the help of MT suggestions and classic fuzzy matches. For specific quality assurance or proofreading steps, you can, for example, now focus on those segments that have been translated using an MT suggestion. You as a project manager or translator have various means to control the use of machine translation. In the segment information window, you can see here, it is tracked with which help I have translated this segment. And in this window, I can find out whether the segment was translated by user or by the MT system. As the information is tracked in this segment information window, I can filter now out for all segments which have been translated with the help of machine translation. Yeah. So I have always a question of view, and I have a predefined filter, and so it displays all segments which I have translated with the help of MT. Yeah, so I can focus on those segments during proofreading step. So the combination of StarMT and Transit. I have here a small summary for you. So what does it mean for the project manager using MT in the project? The project creation doesn't really change much, as you have seen. With an additional tab in the project options, the project manager can turn machine translation on or off and configure it with easy to understand options. As with all project settings, these two can be included in the workflow or in a project template so that the right setting can always be used for similar projects. MT and Project Exchange. Well, here nothing changes with Project Exchange. The machine translation already comes into play at project import. When packing the projects, the results from StarMT are packed automatically in the PPF. On the translators end, the results are available for local use, so translators side access to StarMT is not required. What does it mean for the reviewer post-editor? The quality control of translations remains unchanged, regardless of whether a segment was translated with the support of StarMT, with fuzzy matches from the translation memory, or completely by hand. Yeah? In this way, nothing changes for the reviewer. Of course, for some project, it can make sense to check the MT-based translations with another set of eyes. Yeah? Since the use of MT in Transit is transparent, as you saw, relevant segment pairs, a relevant segment filter can be used to target and specifically display which segments are translated with and without help of machine translation. What MT for the translator? What changes? The translator is shown as before translation suggestions for untranslated segments. What's new is that the translator gets suggestions for many more segments, and many suggestions will fit better than fuzzy matches from the translation memory. I showed you here, I made some screenshots for you. So the additional MT suggestions, instead of no matches, you have machine translation suggestions. And I showed you alternative MT suggestions in addition to our classic fuzzy matches. Yeah? And I showed you the labeling of untranslated words, markup handling for MT suggestions. We also take care of it. Yeah. So here is a brief comparison for you of fuzzy match editing versus MT post editing. Yeah. Fuzzy match and MT suggestion both requires an active confirmation. A fuzzy match has always to be modified. Yeah, and an MT suggestion, as we saw in our project, let me put it like this, mostly. And in a case of a high fuzzy match, by definition, a fuzzy match always has to be modified. An MT suggestion, however, may be a perfectly acceptable translation already. Let me explain you. In practice, it quickly became apparent that the MT quality is especially high for those segments for which there's also a very good fuzzy match. The reason for this is obvious. MT engines are typically trained using a customer-specific translation memory and therefore provide results which are linguistically very similar to any human translation that are available. So fuzzy match and MT quality are linked. High MT quality goes along with high fuzzy quality. In this quality range, it is viewing, reading, and comparing the suggestions that cost translators the most time. Once the best suggestion is selected, amendments are negligible. Using StarMT in Transit, it was clear to us that the translator automatically starts comparing both translation proposals. Yeah, so MT translation and fuzzy the fuzzy target language. The translator checks the suggestions, selects the one which is the most suitable, and, if necessary, makes any linguistic amendments. A fuzzy match must, by definition, always be amended, though an MT translation may not need to be. So let me put it like this. Okay, we have here a fuzzy match classic, yeah, source and target language, and I have proposed is my source old. This line represents the current translation, and the old translation is proposed. This is how fuzzy match works. When you have it combined, fuzzy match and additional MT suggestion, yeah, as you saw, we have the MT result and here the fuzzy match. And we understood very quickly that we have to find a way to make the translators work as easy and simple as possible if you have those combined, and you start comparing this translation and this translation, and you have many lines, and we thought, okay, how can we compress it, combine both worlds? So we came along with this idea. High fuzzy matches and MT suggestions are now combined into a single joint translation suggestion, as this makes the number of suggestions clearer and simplifies both checking and decision making. So for classic fuzzy matches, the translator needs to be able to compare the old and new segment, which therefore requires the corresponding additional information, yeah, the colored thing. In conjunction with machine translation suggestions, this is superfluous. It simply needs to be clear to the translator which part of the segment comes from the translation memory and which part comes from the MT engine. In this case, the colored part comes from the MT engine and the black part is from your validated translation. So the result here is a compact translation suggestion that combines the advantages of a fuzzy match from a validated translation memory with the efficiency of an MT engine. With our TM validated MT suggestion, the translator can focus on post-editing and minimize the time spent in viewing, selecting, and adapting translation suggestions from these two sources. So with Service Pack 9, we will release this new type of translation suggestion. Transit will, where appropriate, display translation suggestions combined from fuzzy matches and StarMT, our MT validated MT suggestion. The translator can recognize immediately which part of the suggestion comes from the validated translation memory and which part comes from StarMT. Let me show you in our Transit editor some effects. So I have prepared another project for you, and again, I have both combined translation memory and machine translation. And here are some examples. So instead of displaying an MT suggestion and a fuzzy match, where it makes sense, we display a compact. We combine both worlds. In segment number 8, I can see the word slow is the difference. So it's translated here to langsam, and I have my translation proposal. So me as a translator, I can focus on the translation. What is displayed here is the MT translation. This is machine translation, yeah. And with the help of the translation memory, we validate that this might be the perfect translation already, or the better translation. Yeah? So another example. Again here, what calibrated and not initialized is to be translated. Yeah? And I have here a TM validated MT proposal. What is black? The black text is from your validated translation memory, and this word has been added by machine translation. And what is displayed here is the machine translation result. The same case, I have now 2 words added, the word not, and I can focus on this colored part as a translator. Is this correct? And I can accept it. It's just for me as the translator, I need to know what is the difference to my translation memory, and I have it colored. Yeah. So validating, what we do here is, so let's assume star MT shall translate the segment turn the upper control fully to the left and translates drehen Sie den oberen Regler ganz nach links. Now Transit checks whether there is a similar segment in the translation memory and finds the reference segments and determines that in the source language, turn the upper and fully to the left are similar in both. And in the target language, drehen Sie and ganz nach links are similar. The equivalent from the translation memory is validated, and the translator can concentrate here on the colored part. Yeah? So what is displayed in the Transit editor is the machine translation, yeah, and we validate it with your translation memory. What we do not do is to repair fuzzy matches with MT suggestions. So this would have the following effect. Let's assume the same segment is to be translated, turn the upper controlled fully to the left, and another system does not use MT first, but checks first of all the translation memory. And here it finds a similar reference segment, which matches except of the word control. Yeah, control. And here in my memory, I have adjusting screw with my German translation. This fuzzy match is accepted. A part of the word control. Yeah. So the word control is sent to machine translation and translated, for example, with the word Regler. So the difference in the source language is considered to be repaired. The rest is accepted as it is. The missing word control is sent to the MT engine and the missing word is translated without validation if this gap filler fits into the context. Yeah, in German, here this word has to be changed as well. Yeah. So what we do is we validate the MT proposal with the help of the translation memory. And a repaired fuzzy is mostly not the perfect translation. Missing translations are here inserted by search and replace, and there is no validation if the gap filler fits into the context. And as a result, the translator has to check the whole translation. And this is why we thought, we take the other way, yeah? Because in a higher fuzzy range, this is mostly can be the perfect translation already. The MT suggestion is not changed, but validated against the translation memory match, and changes are highlighted in color. As a result, you as a translator, you can focus also, you see immediately with the colored parts what is the difference. No? Excuse me. Okay, as a summary, the StarMT and Transit. I showed you, or I explained to you, what is the engine training, and we generate from Transit so-called bilingual text corpora consisting of pure text, and we can do this for really any file format and use it for our engine training. There are no extra steps or tools for project management, and the same applies for the translation. You as a translator and project manager, you have transparency. You always know whether you are accessing machine translation, and you can track the use of machine translation in your projects. As you saw, there is no unchecked takeover of segments deriving from machine translation. The segment information window tracks the use of MT, and you can use, as always, your segment filters to do your quality assurance steps. Yeah, you as a translator, you always know whether you are accessing reference material, translation memory, or suggestions from machine translation. And I showed you at the end what is our TM validated MC suggestion, that we validate the MT result with the help of translation memory. We do not repair fuzzy matches using machine translation, but we have a technique to validate the MT results. Now I have attended to all topics I wanted to tell you. Thank you very much for joining this webinar. See you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.